welcome to this morning's press conference with Green Party Leader Annamie Paul. Ms. Paul is joined today by Shailene Paniello, Tori Arnett, Nina Ndombe, Michael Levinson, Taylor McCrae-Yu, Jemark Earl, Jalen Borges and Cooper Price. Bienvenue à la conférence de presse ce matin avec la chef du Parti vert, Annamie Paul. Madame Paul est rejointe aujourd'hui par Shailene Paniello, Tori Arnett, Nina Ndombe, Michael Levinson, Taylor McCrae-Yu, Jemark Earl, Jalen Borges and Cooper Price.
Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Merci d'être avec nous ce matin. Je suis ici sur les territoires traditionnels des Mississauga, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, et Huron-Wendat. I'm here on the traditional territories of the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Huron-Wendat. Thank you for being with us today. And today we are going to be talking about students. We are going to be speaking with students. We are going to be doing what we have always done throughout the pandemic, which is to identify the holes, identify groups that are at risk, people in Canada that are at risk of falling through the cracks, of being left behind, of being permanently damaged by the pandemic that continues to rage in Canada, and calling attention to that, proposing constructive solutions in order to address whatever the issue is. We promised to do that from the start of the pandemic. We are going to continue to do it throughout because we still have those holes. We still have people that are being left behind, and our commitment is to not only raise the alarm but to work constructively with the other parties to propose solutions and get them launched so that they can make a real difference as soon as possible. And so in today's case, we are speaking about students, specifically about post-secondary students. And I'm so pleased to be joined by Michael and Jalen, and also by our guests that are joining us on Zoom as well to talk about that. So here are the facts. Here are the things that we know. During the pandemic, post-secondary students, many of them already struggling under the debt of tuition, under the expense of their living expenses, all of those students who ultimately end up with an average of $28,000 of debt pre-pandemic had the pandemic fall upon them. What it meant in real terms is that the jobs that students have during the year to help them get by during the academic year, and the jobs that students have after the academic year during the summer to help them make their tuition in the fall, make their living expenses in the fall, both of those things disappeared. Now, those things disappeared and they didn't come back. We know that in the summer, the unemployment rate among students was I believe, capped off somewhere around 40%. We know it still hovers around the 18 to 20% mark. The kind of jobs that students traditionally do were amongst the first to go. The student benefit, which students had to really push for to receive in the first place, was only a fraction of the CERB and then the CRB that replaced it, and it ended in August. And so what does this mean? It means in concrete terms that there are people that should have been in school this fall, that were in school last fall, the previous fall, the fall of 2019, that weren't able to go back. And those that were able to go back, many of them now face a crushing debt that is going to trail after them many years after their studies have ended. And those who are most impacted, of course, are the same that we have seen time and time again throughout the pandemic, being hurt the worst and the first. Low-income students, racialized students. Those are the students that have been amongst those hardest hit and already were struggling to have access to an education. So during the early stages of the pandemic, what I had said is that 2020 and 2021 in terms of education was going to be different. It had to be different in recognition of the jobs that never materialized last summer and the already crushing debt that many students faced. We had said that we wanted to see a suspension of tuition for the 2020-2021 academic year and an extension of benefits for students so that they had a living stipend. Looking beyond the pandemic, what we are saying very clearly, and the Green Party has been saying this for years now, and we continue to be the only party to call for this. We are the only party to call for an end to tuition fees. We are calling for an abolition of post-secondary tuition fees. We are calling for a forgiveness of the student portion of any existing debt held by the federal government, because we know that education is a right. We know that every single person in Canada who seeks post-secondary education should have access to it, needs to have access to it, and in recognition that this is a fundamental right, and we continue to leave so many people out in the cold in terms of accessing that right, we need to abolish tuition, and we need to forgive the federal portion of student debt. Now, for those who say that this is impractical, impossible, unaffordable, please remember that there are other countries that do this already. There are countries in Europe that have been doing this for multiple generations of students. Their GDP is fine, their economies are thriving, and it's exactly because they understand that when you invest in students, you are investing in the future. You are investing in the future of your country. There is no better investment that we can make. And the cost of inaction, that is the thing we need to worry about. It is not cost-free not to help students, not to ensure that they can access that education. So we need to realize once and for all that a minimum of 2 to 4 years of post-secondary education is necessary, you know, in order to fully participate in this society, whether it's through work or through civic engagement. We need to recognize that it's a fundamental right, that there are those who are shut out. We need to solve it. The solutions are at hand, and I'm looking forward to hearing from our speakers about that. In my case, and you know, I'll share my case, you know, because I can tell you that were I a student at this moment in time, I don't know if I would have been able to go to university. I was able to and had to pay my own way through university. And I did that by working part-time all throughout the academic year, and then working from the first day of the summer until the day before school began full-time. Now that wasn't easy to do, but it was enough. Back when I went to school, not that long ago, in my post-secondary education, you were able to pay your way. And I had options available to me when I finished my studies because I wasn't crippled with that kind of debt. And to know that that is not a possibility for people like myself who are considering their studies and what they want to do with their lives, that we are already limiting our young generations, their futures and their prospects, is a very, very, it's an unacceptable state of affairs. This kind of inequality between generations, these are the things that threaten our society. These are the things that threaten our democracy. So we have the solutions, and we can certainly work together and seek to work together with other parties on this. This is something that we can commit to do in this session of Parliament, and certainly if it's not done in this session of Parliament, we will be taking this issue into the next election, because we are going to be there, as I said, for those who need us the most and those who are going to need the most help to recover from this pandemic. Alors, nous sommes ici aujourd'hui pour dire que c'est le moment d'assurer que les étudiants qui cherchent accès à l'éducation postsecondaire peuvent le faire d'une manière abordable. Pendant la pandémie, il y a eu un taux de chômage parmi les étudiants énormément élevé. En août de l'année passée, en juillet et août, le taux de chômage était à peu près 40% parmi les étudiants. On sait aussi que les types de travail que les étudiants sont normalement les personnes à faire dans le secteur de services, par exemple, c'était les premiers travails à disparaître, que la prestation offerte à les étudiants a été terminée dans le mois d'août et que ça n'existe plus, et le taux de chômage reste énormément élevé. Alors, les étudiants marginalisés, les étudiants provenant des milieux de faibles revenus, ils ont été fort impactés même avant la pandémie et maintenant, c'est une crise. Nous, en tant que parti, nous avons toujours promis que pendant la pandémie, nous serons toujours dédiés à identifier les lacunes, à identifier les trous dans notre système et à les chercher à les remplir en collaboration et coopération avec les autres partis politiques. Ça reste notre promesse. Ça reste notre promesse à tous les jeunes étudiants qui cherchent à améliorer leur avenir par accéder à l'éducation postsecondaire. L'éducation postsecondaire est un droit, c'est un droit fondamental. On le reconnaît, l'ONU le reconnaît, c'est reconnu dans le droit international. Et on sait que c'est nécessaire d'avoir au moins 2 à 4 années d'éducation postsecondaire pour participer pleinement dans l'économie, pour participer pleinement dans la société civile aussi. Alors, qu'est-ce qu'on demande? Nous avons demandé, même avant la pandémie, de voir une abolition des frais de scolarité postsecondaire. Et on demande en plus que la portion du dette qui appartient au gouvernement fédéral par les étudiants, que ça aussi soit aboli, exactement parce que ça crée des inégalités. Ça crée des inégalités intergénérationnelles, ça crée des inégalités dans notre société. Et c'est ça exactement qui fragilise notre société. C'est ça qui est au final les choses qui créent des divisions dans notre société. Et pour les personnes qui disent que ce n'est pas abordable, qu'on ne peut pas assumer un tel coût, moi je dis que c'est un investissement dans le futur de notre pays. Moi je dis que c'est un investissement dans notre avenir. Et on n'avait jamais eu peur d'investir dans notre avenir. S'il y a des autres pays au monde qui payent pour l'éducation de leurs étudiants postsecondaires, c'est exactement parce qu'ils ont compris que c'est le meilleur investissement qu'ils peuvent faire en tant que société pour assurer et sécuriser leur avenir. Alors, je suis vraiment très contente d'avoir nos participants avec nous aujourd'hui. Merci beaucoup pour vos observations. Et je vais maintenant passer à la discussion avec notre grand panel. Nous allons le faire un peu d'une manière table ronde. Je vais demander premièrement à Michael et Jalen de s'introduire et puis de dire quelques mots. Et puis, nous allons passer à notre panel. So I'm just going to ask Michael first and then Jalen to introduce themselves, to make some quick observations, and then we're going to pass to our panel. Michael, do you want to just come forward?
Sure.
Maybe I'll go this side.
No worries. Hello, I'm Michael. I'm a University of Toronto student. Just came to learn more about the leader of the Green Party and about this cool legislation. And just... Oh, it's picking me up? Oh, okay, cool. Sorry about that. Not very used to this all.
Hello, I'm Jalen Borgers. I go to Trinity College with Michael. I think it's really important that in Canada that we have tuition free for all students. I think having education is one of the fundamental pillars for a healthy democracy and a healthy society, and education is a right and it should be accessible to everyone no matter what. Thank you.
So I'm going to ask our panel to introduce themselves, and maybe just to say that there's never any, there are mistakes sometimes with the party, but this is not one of them. We deliberately chose this location because we are standing in the shadow of the University of Toronto, one of the most outstanding universities in the world, and of course one that every student who makes the grades, who's done the work, who's gotten their admissions letter, should be able to attend without ever asking themselves, can I make the tuition? Can I make my living expenses? Am I going to be able to find work after my degree to pay these tens of thousands of dollars of debt that I have accumulated? And I think that everyone probably knows a student now who has been forced to ask that question. So can I now ask the panel to introduce themselves? I cannot see you, so if you can just go around and just say who you are and which organization you represent.
I guess I'm gonna go first. So thank you for having us again for a second time today. Sorry, for a second time this year. So my name is Nina Ndombe. I attend Collège State. Can I say it in French
Oui,
too?
absolument.
Yeah.
Oui, à tous les panélistes, vous pouvez faire vos remarques en français ou en anglais.
Perfect. OK, donc bonjour, mon nom est Nina Ndombe. Encore merci beaucoup pour m'avoir invité encore à la table aujourd'hui une fois cette année. Euh, donc je vais au collège La Cité à Ottawa. Je suis présidente de l'association étudiante à Ottawa. Dès que j'ai eu cette invitation sur le sujet de l'éducation, ça m'a vraiment intriguée puisque je vois que depuis la première conversation que nous avons eue par rapport à l'impact des frais de scolarité a porté fruit aujourd'hui. Donc, je suis très excitée à pouvoir partager cette table ronde avec tous. Et puis, oui, réellement, c'est un des plus grands droits que nous avons, que ce soit de la Charte canadienne ou que ce soit aussi un des droits aussi établis par l'ONU, c'est l'éducation. Alors, moi, j'ai toujours pensé que l'éducation devrait être gratuite, surtout pour un pays comme le Canada qui a beaucoup de ressources et d'accessibilité.
Merci beaucoup. La prochaine. Whoever,
Hi,
yeah.
my name is Jamark. I'm currently a third-year law student at McGill University, where I also did my undergrad in the Bachelor of Music, and I'm currently representing the Student Society of McGill University as their president. And I thought that this was a really interesting topic, similar to what you were saying. It's something that's impacted every decision that I've made ever since deciding where to go to university, whether or not I can take this summer job, because it could be a cool opportunity, but it might not be able to pay for my studies, whether or not I'll be able to do an extracurricular activity, etc. So I'm really looking forward to engaging in this conversation. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much, Jamark.
Hi, I'm Cooper. I'm actually not in post-secondary education right now. I'm a high school student, which I think is kind of why I was drawn to this legislation and this conversation today. And I'm also involved as an activist in the youth climate strike movement, which I do think has a lot of connections to the conversation we're having today. And for me, as I look ahead in about a year to, accepting offers to universities, applying and all of that, this is such an incredible piece of the conversation that we often leave out or don't even really think about with high school students and the incredible burden that is being placed on us with post-secondary education. So I'm just really looking forward to having this conversation.
Great. Thanks, Cooper. I'm going to have to counter you to who's going next.
I think that's it. Shailene says they won't be speaking, so we'll leave space for the students.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. And, let's just dive right in. And I'll bring Jalen and Michael back as well. Tell me a bit more about this concern. We even before the pandemic, there was a lot of struggle. There was a lot of uncertainty. What difference has the year plus now of pandemic we've been in concretely? What has it meant? Jamark, do you want to just elaborate a little bit more on what you were saying about how it has impacted your decision making throughout your education?
For sure. So I think one of the main things is that post-secondary education is currently inaccessible the way it is for a lot of students. A lot of students can't afford to go, or if they do afford to go, they have to take on these loads of student debt that they're going to have to figure out how to pay, within 5 to 10 years after they graduate. So even while they're going through their post-secondary education, they're not able to go through like some of the extracurriculars that a lot of their peers might be going through, because they now have to be working part-time jobs to be able to pay for rent, to be able to pay for tuition. And so they're not able to do these extracurriculars. It also affects their grades, because when they should be studying for exams, they're now, working late night shifts. I'm speaking of myself here and a few of my other peers. So it creates this sort of loop where now when they're going to decide whether or not they want to go to graduate school or look for jobs, their grades might not be up to par with their peers who didn't have to do these. They might not have the same number of extracurriculars as their peers. So again, it looks badly on them in 3 to 4 years' time, where they're going to have to take on an additional load of student debt if they do decide to go to grad school, or if they're taking a job. It factors into where they're going to work. They might not be working their dream job, for example. And so again, it's something that affects a lot of students. And yeah, just to elaborate a bit more on that, it creates this sort of inaccessible loop that it needs to be started. Like the discussions need to happen from the ground up, and we can't really tackle it after the fact. We need to like start working on it for people who are going to university, and that's where like these conversations need to start.
That is a really excellent point. You know, this isn't just about what happens after you graduate with the debt. You know, it's very important to understand what you described, which is that the inequality starts during the education in terms of equality of opportunity, the option of taking up those opportunities. It creates inequality between students themselves. That's a really excellent point to underline. And Jamark, before we move on, do you want to just tell people what is the base tuition for law studies right now? I mean, what is the tuition?
So that varies, I think, depending on the school. And
the one you're at, for instance, just to give an example.
So for out-of-province students from McGill, it's around $10,000, which is nowhere near comparable to some of the other schools. One of the main reasons why I chose to study at McGill is because like the tuition would be a fraction of the cost. Even if I were to go to U of T, which is my hometown, even if I were to live at home, it's a lot cheaper for me to study at McGill because of the tuition. Even though it's still expensive, it's much less than some of the other schools in Canada.
That's right. A U of T is over 20,000, I believe, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Okay. Michael or Jalen, do you want to add anything about that the question that I just asked? Yes, please.
Yeah, so I could just ask here. So summer internships are coming up, and people are trying to find jobs for the summer, and especially within the U of T community, and for people trying to find a job or position related to their field, there's a lot of looking at the camera. Oh, the camera. Sorry, my bad. So for people trying to find jobs in their field, often there's unpaid internships, and for people who can afford to do the unpaid internship, it's more difficult. Or people who can't afford to do it, it's more difficult to get it, because those opportunities seem to be more catered towards more privileged people. So that last remark about like kind of inequalities within your years at university itself and not necessarily after, I think it's a good comment.
Yeah, I think the comment about inequality and financial inequality between students is a really good point. Some students who are focused on paying off debt or may have family obligations as well may not be able to have the same opportunities as students who are, for example, more privileged and have that access to pay off tuition without worrying about their financial situation. So I think with such legislation proposed by the Green Party, I think that allows lower income students who are maybe during their studies focus on paying off debt or making enough money to pay off rent and other expenses. I think this would allow such students to achieve better opportunities that normally they would have to turn away or not even think about applying for, and further advance their career in whatever field they choose to. So I think it's a really important things to consider.
Alors, une question en français. Est-ce que les étudiants ont réussi à trouver des emplois, et quel est l'impact de ne pas avoir encore une prestation pour les étudiants?
I guess je vais répondre à cette question-là. Depuis la dernière conversation qu'on a eue, il y a encore beaucoup d'étudiants pour lesquels c'est très dur de trouver un emploi. Premièrement, de trouver un emploi en général, et deuxièmement, de trouver un emploi qui concorde avec leur horaire. Donc ça, c'est aussi c'est vraiment un très gros manquement au niveau au niveau en fait des finances des étudiants. Pourquoi est-ce qu'un étudiant serait obligé de pouvoir penser à trouver, à survenir à ses besoins financiers pendant qu'ils vont à l'école? Donc c'est vraiment ça. Depuis la dernière conversation qu'on avait eue, c'est très dur. Moi, en tant que présidente de l'association étudiante, j'ai beaucoup de communication avec plusieurs étudiants La première personne que les étudiants viennent parler pour lorsqu'ils ont des problèmes, c'est vraiment moi. Et puis, des raisons les plus principales qu'un étudiant peut venir me chercher, c'est surtout est-ce qu'il y a un emploi, une offre d'emploi au collège? Est-ce
Mhm.
qu'un offre d'emploi, est-ce qu'il y a il y a une offre d'emploi de la communauté? Et puis, il y a plusieurs étudiants, malheureusement, qui n'ont pas trouvé d'emploi. Et puis, ceux qui ont trouvé d'emploi, ce sont des emplois euh, au salaire minimum.
Mhm.
Il n'est même pas capable de subvenir aux besoins. Pourquoi?
Oui.
Parce que si un étudiant qui va à l'école à temps plein, qui est peut-être comme 35 à 40 heures déjà, comme j'ai Marc dit, devrait travailler le soir. Donc déjà, il n'y a pas assez, l'étudiant n'a pas assez de sommeil pour se concentrer en classe.
Oui.
Beaucoup d'étudiants cette année, malheureusement, n'ont pas pu compléter certains de leurs cours.
Mhm.
Moi, pour ma part, à moi, franchement, puis très honnêtement, euh, j'ai j'ai dû à pouvoir jongler la vie d'étudiant en tant qu'un étudiant à temps plein, mais en plus de cela, en ce moment, je fais mon stage et je travaille et aussi je suis mère monoparentale. Donc, tu vois que ça crée déjà ça crée beaucoup de stress. Comme j'avais dit la dernière fois, le Collège de la Cité a une particularité, c'est que nous n'avons pas seulement des étudiants qui viennent directement de compléter l'école secondaire, nous avons aussi des étudiants qui sont majeurs, qui sont matures, des parents.
Oui.
Alors, ça fait ça fait qu'on a déjà, comme déjà, beaucoup de stress quand ça vient à notre socialisation et puis nos familles et tout. Donc, c'est
Ca-
ça. Jusqu'à
Can,
maintenant, on a trouvé des
oui.
solutions. Et
Oui.
donc, surtout les étudiants internationaux il y a aucune. Il ne faut pas oublier que les étudiants internationaux sont aussi là. Puis il y a beaucoup d'étudiants internationaux qui, malheureusement, ne peuvent pas trouver d'emploi, non seulement à cause du fait qu'ils sont en plein, mais surtout à cause du fait qu'ils n'ont pas encore le statut. Puis plusieurs emplois requièrent ces documents-là.
Right.
Euh,
Can I pick up on that just in English? That's just an excellent point that you've made because this is also something that I think is allowing students, post-secondary students, to be treated as second-class citizens. And I think we have to just say that plainly. The benefit that was received this summer, the lack of summer jobs, the refusal to put a moratorium on tuition, at least for this year, and to continue those benefits throughout the pandemic. All of these things put students at a disadvantage. And one of the reasons that I think that this has been allowed is exactly because people don't necessarily understand what the face of post-secondary education looks like. And to your point, you were speaking about mature students, you were speaking about international students. I just wanted those of you, you're student leaders. So can you tell us, in your programs on the campus, what is the face of post-secondary education now? Help us to dispel the myth that everyone lives at home and their parents are paying their tuition and they're really just working for pocket money. I'm going to let anyone who would like to jump in on that jump in. Brandon, would you like to jump in on that?
Yes, hello. My name is Brandon. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a student at Lakehead University in Aurelia, as well as an organizer with the Don't Forget Students campaign and a number of other student groups. I think, the reality is that a post-secondary education today is as essential as a high school education was just a generation ago. And we have to stop, funding it, in a way that no longer works. When it comes to recent graduates, to people who've been paying off their student debt for 10 years, being under the thumb of student debt is not helping anyone get ahead. It's not helping our communities. And when it comes to people like me who are still in school, I can tell you, I haven't lived with my parents the entire time I've been in post-secondary. I'm trying to make ends meet as best as I can. Having to work and have to go to school is a challenge, and it means you don't really get to take in post-secondary in a way that you're supposed to. And we've seen increasingly the efforts to privatize post-secondary education, efforts to balance the books off the backs of international students, off of graduate students who are in graduate programs, and that stifles innovation. It stifles creativity, and it's not what post-secondary is supposed to be about. Yes, it's about the job market. Yes, it's about the pursuit of knowledge. But what we really need is to fundamentally rethink post-secondary education, and that'll put Canada in a much stronger position than we are currently. And especially through the pandemic, I think we've really seen that the increase in mental health issues, the financial stress, and the quality of education has decreased during the pandemic. What we need to do is make significant investments in both the institutions as well as in students and in people who are still paying off their student debt, because we are going to be facing a challenge like no other when we come out of this. And of course, we also have other issues of justice going on, and people within post-secondary are learning so that we can try and change those things.
That's
so
right.
We need to give everyone a leg up.
That's right. Thank you so much for that, Brandon. And I think we're coming to the end of our time. This is the second time we've had this discussion. It's going to be an ongoing one because we don't drop these issues until they are resolved. And we know that we have set ourselves on a path now with when you combine tuition with living expenses, with the pandemic, that risks leaving young people, and not just young people, but students behind for many years to come. We have already been warned by Statistics Canada that we may be embedding into our system now an intergenerational inequity, that we may be embedding a loss of earning that is going to be permanent, and that again is going to harm low-income people, racialized people, marginalized people the worst. And Brandon, you made an excellent point, and I think that that's an excellent point to leave on, which is that this education is necessary. There was a time that you could get by, you could get employed, you could have a life on a high school education, on a secondary education. That time has come and gone. And to the extent that this education is necessary, it should be a right, it should be accessible. And this is something that we absolutely support, that we're going to continue to push for. And as we always do, we invite the other parties to join us. We are always seeking to create coalitions of carrying around these issues. We don't consider them to be nonpartisan, but if we need to be the only ones to push us to where we should be, which is offering the best, most accessible, most affordable education to people in the world, we will be the party to say that, because that is the kind of ambition we should have for our country. Alors, je voulais remercier Michael et Jalen et tous nos panélistes. Et juste pour faire la promesse de la part de notre parti que nous allons continuer à pousser pour l'abolition des frais de scolarité postsecondaire, l'abolition du dette qui est tenue par le gouvernement fédéral. On reconnaît que l'éducation est un droit. On sait que nous sommes en train de créer une situation qui va traîner pour des années et impacter les étudiants pour les années si on ne le résout pas. Et le Parti vert est là pour travailler en coalition avec tous les autres partis. Mais si nous restons les seuls pour dire que nous devrons faire tout ce qui est nécessaire, on devrait avoir l'ambition d'avoir le meilleur système pour les étudiants postsecondaires. Nous allons le dire et je le dis aujourd'hui. Thank you so much again for being with us. Thank you for this discussion. We'll continue it. We'll continue to work on this and to propose the solutions with your help. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Ms. Paul. Thank you to all the panelists. This concludes today's press conference. Merci, Madame Paul. Merci à tous les panélistes. Ceci conclut la conférence de presse.